Hey everyone! So there's a rather technical detail that's found near the end of Parshat Pekudei that's very easy to overlook and dismiss as a grammatical point, but if we really take the time to try to understand it, it could actually teach us a lot about the Mishkan, a lot about Parshat HaChodesh, and a lot about our own personal relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So let's get started. Finally, after all these weeks of discussing the construction of the different aspects of the Mishkan, it's time to put it all together. And Hashem turns to Moshe at the very end of Parshat Pekudei, the very end of Sefer Shemot, the beginning of Parak Mem, and tells Moshe, you are going to set up all the parts of the Mishkan all together on Aleph Nisan, on the first day of Nisan. Now, in the normal way of saying that, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu was writing this, giving this command to Moshe in the normal way, he would have told Moshe to set up the Mishkan b'chodesh harishon be'echad l'chodesh, on the first month, on the first day of the month. The first month being Nisan, right? Because that's where the Jewish year starts, and the first day of the month being Aleph Nisan. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't do that. HaKadosh Baruch Hu adds in an extra word that changes the entire meaning. Hashem doesn't tell Moshe to set up the Mishkan b'chodesh harishon be'echad l'chodesh, but rather b'yom hachodesh harishon be'echad l'chodesh, on the day of the first month, on the first of the month. He adds in this extra word b'yom, and it sounds off in our ears, and it changes the entire meaning of the phrase. So what does b'yom hachodesh harishon be'echad l'chodesh actually mean? Because no word in the Torah is going to be extra or unnecessary. So we're going to get back to this question at the end, but I want to jump for a second to Parshat HaChodesh. This week we're going to be reading Parshat HaChodesh. It's a section in the 12th chapter of Sefer Shemot that's always read on the Shabbos before Rosh Chodesh Nisan. And just to set the scene, the Jewish people are situated in Egypt. They know they're going to be leaving in a couple of weeks, and Hashem turns to the people and says, HaChodesh hazeh lachem Rosh Chodeshim. This month is going to be for you the first of all months. Which at first glance seems to be that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling the people that this month, Nisan, is going to be the first of all the months of the year, meaning the calendar is going to start with the month of Nisan. Except it can't be what this phrase means, because the very next clause in the pasuk is Rishon hu lachem lechodshei hashana, that this month is going to be the first for all the months of the year. And if that's what the second clause of the pasuk means, that Nisan is going to be the first month out of all the months of the year, then clearly that's not what the first clause of the pasuk means, because they can't mean the same thing. HaChodesh hazeh lachem Rosh Chodeshim must mean something different then, something other than the fact that Nisan is the first month of the year. So what does HaChodesh hazeh lachem Rosh Chodeshim mean? Rav Hirsch picks up on this point, and Rav Hirsch explains that the word Chodesh doesn't actually mean month. Stemming from the word Chadash, new, the word Chodesh actually means a renewal of some sorts. Because at the beginning of every month, there is a renewal of the moon. The moon it's a new moon where there's nothing, and then you see a small sliver, and the moon starts getting renewed. And therefore, Rav Hirsch says, that's why the word Chodesh also is used to mean month, as a derivative of the fact that at the beginning of each month, there is a renewal, and therefore a month gets named after this renewal. But the point is that's a derivative, but the real meaning of Chodesh is renewal. And therefore, HaChodesh hazeh lachem Rosh Chodeshim actually means that HaChodesh hazeh, this renewal that you see in the sky, at the beginning of every month, when you see the moon start to renew, that's supposed to be lachem, that's supposed to be for you, a Rosh Chodeshim, a reminder that you yourselves personally are also supposed to have a renewal. Essentially, Rav Hirsch explains it as follows. That what happens at the beginning of every month is you have the sun, this massive sun, and you have this little tiny moon. And the little tiny moon has gotten to the point where it's reflecting none of the sun's light. And then the sun and the moon start turning into a certain position that you can see a little bit of the sun's light reflected on the moon, and then they start turning a little bit more, so now you can see a little bit more light reflected from the sun onto the moon, and then it turns even more, and then you can see even more light reflected from the sun and the moon. And each month is the story of the moon beginning without any of the sun's light reflected on it, and starts turning more and more until a lot of the sun's light is reflected on it. And Rav Hirsch explains that at the beginning of every month, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling us to look up into the sky and remind ourselves that the same thing is true about us. It's supposed to be a metaphor for our relationship with Hashem. Hashem is the big, massive, humongous sun. And we, the Jewish people, are the moon. And essentially, we a lot of times are in a position where we're not reflecting any of Hashem's light, where we're not representing any of the values of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But just like the moon, which starts out not reflecting any of the light of the sun and is able to turn itself every single month to start reflecting more and more of the sun's light, so too we are also able to have a renewal. And even at moments where we're not reflecting any of the sun's light, we're not representing any of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's values, we're able to start turning more and more and start reflecting a little bit more and a little bit more and eventually a lot more of the sun's light onto the world. We, the moon, are never stuck at a place of despair. We're never stuck at a low point, but we're always able, like the moon, to turn more and more and reflect more of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light into the world. And that's what HaChodesh hazeh lachem Rosh Chodeshim means. That you look at the moon in the beginning of every month, and you're supposed to remind yourself that this is a model that you, the Jewish people, are able to adopt as well. And the reason why this is significant, it's not just a significant point for Rosh Chodesh, but once we're able to determine when Rosh Chodesh is, when the beginning of every month is, then we're able to determine when the holidays are, when the Moadim are. And Rav Hirsch explains that the Moadim, the holidays, are the same point. Rav Hirsch points out that the word Moed comes from the root, I'm going to read his words, Ya'ad, which means to call a meeting, or to denote a place for a designated meeting, or a time designated for meeting. And Rav Hirsch says as follows: if we may speak in human terms, this meeting should be voluntary, from both sides. It should not be like a master summoning his servants into his presence. It is God who wishes that his people should come to him. This is why he specifies only in general terms the time of their coming to him. He allows them a certain latitude within which they themselves may set the exact date for the meeting, so that the time of this meeting will be by mutual choice. Rav Hirsch's point is just like the sun and the moon are both turning in order to create this reality where the moon is reflecting the sun's light, so too it's not just HaKadosh Baruch Hu turning to us, but we also have to do our part, mutually, to turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in order to best reflect this light. And the reason Rav Hirsch explains that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling this lesson to the Jewish people while they're in Egypt is because these people are steeped in a culture of paganism where they think that there are these gods that control your entire fate, your entire destiny, and you're just a passive player in the game. You're just a pawn. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying, no, you are no longer just going to be passive members of the game. You're now going to be active members. It's not just me, the God, working on you, but I'm going to be now working with you, and it's going to be mutual, and you're going to do your part too. I'm not just going to be coming to you, but you, my friends, also have to be coming to me. That's the message of Parshat HaChodesh. Now, what in the world does that have to do with our original question in Parshat Pekudei? Why HaKadosh Baruch Hu, instead of saying B'chodesh harishon be'achad l'chodesh, says B'yom HaChodesh harishon be'achad l'chodesh? Well, now it all makes sense. If we go by Rav Hirsch that the word Chodesh doesn't actually mean month, but could really mean renewal, then essentially, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Moshe to build the Mishkan on Aleph Nisan, by using those words, he's telling him the following message: B'yom HaChodesh harishon, on the day of the very first renewal, which is Be'achad l'chodesh, on the first of the month, on that day, Takim et Mishkan Olam Moed, on that day, you should build the Mishkan. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling Moshe that I want you to build a Mishkan on the day of the first renewal. Meaning exactly 1 year ago, on Aleph Nisan, you were in Egypt, and I told you about this commandment of Rosh Chodesh. Why? Because I want the Jewish people to always look up at the sky every single month and remind themselves that they're not supposed to be passive players in the game, but we have an active relationship, a mutual relationship, where they're active players too. Now, exactly 1 year later, on the first day of Nisan, Bashana HaShenit, in the second year, which is exactly 1 year later, the day that the Mishkan is built, I want the Jewish people to have the exact same experience. But not just to have this reminder by looking up in the sky, but also having this reminder by a structure set in front of them. B'yom HaChodesh HaRishon, on this day of the first renewal, on this day where the Jewish people have the opportunity to remind themselves that they're an active player in the game, on that day, Takim et Mishkan Ohel Moed. An Ohel, a tent of Moed, of meeting, which, like Rav Hirsch said, doesn't just mean HaKadosh Baruch Hu coming to the meeting, but we're coming to the meeting as well. The Ohel Moed, the Mishkan, represents the exact same message as Rosh Chodesh. The fact that we're not just passive players in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's game, but we're active individuals as well. HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes down, but we have to go as well. Hashivenu Hashem Elecha. Hashem, you set the framework in which we're able to return. V'nashuva. But then we're going to also return, and we're going to step into that framework. And we have to recognize that this is the reality of our lives. That we have the opportunity, just like the moon, to reflect the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but it's not going to happen if we don't put in the work. It's not just going to be that God runs the world for us and we just sit there and let things happen to us. No, we have to be active in our relationship with God and reflecting God's values to the world. It's not going to happen if we don't do our part. So take the lesson of the Mishkan, take the lesson of Parshat HaChodesh, and make your Avodas Hashem not a passive thing, but an active thing. By doing so, you're going to be reflecting all the lessons that we're going to be speaking about this Shabbos, and you're really going to be enhancing not only your relationship with the HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but your position in this world as an Eved Hashem. Have a great Shabbos, everyone, and Chodesh Tov. Bye-bye.